Hey guys, welcome or welcome back to my channel. I'm Jazmine Tanaya if you're new here, and if you are not new here, hello, welcome back to the channel. This channel is full of college content, lifestyle content, and now true crime cases. Yes, this is a new series that I'm bringing to my channel. I thought that it is so appropriate. It fits right in with my niche on the channel. I wanted to go through some popular true crime cases and react to them and just, you know, put my input in and put my little 2 cents in if anybody cares. So yeah, so that brings us to today's video. Today we will be discussing and dissecting the case of George Stinney Jr. So George Stinney Jr. was a 14-year-old black African-American boy. He was born on October 21st, 1929 in Alcolu, South Carolina. Alcolu is a small town. As of today, 2025, they have a total population of 429 people living there. So it's really small. Probably was even smaller back in 1929 when George was born. He was born to parents George Stinney Sr. and May Brown Stinney. He had one brother and 2 sisters, his brother Charles and his 2 sisters Catherine and Amay. I just find it so interesting how one of the daughters is named after the mom and one of the sons is named after the dad. I just find that so interesting. His brother was 12 and Catherine was 10 and Amay was 7. And I'm hoping I'm saying Amay right. I believe that's how it's pronounced. George Stinney Sr., he worked at the company's town mill and the family lived in company housing. Alcolu was a small working class mill town and their neighborhoods were divided by the railroad tracks. So one part of the neighborhood on one side of the railroad track had all black people living there, and then on the other side of the railroad track there were white people. And that was pretty popular for the times back then, to divide small towns by railroad tracks. And of course that was due to segregation back then. And of course, just like in segregation, black people had their own churches, schools, supermarkets to shop at, as well as the white people had the same. And the interaction between black people and white people was limited, of course, segregation. So as I was reading up on George Stinney and like his childhood, he had a pretty normal childhood from what I read. Nothing out of the ordinary. You know, just a small town little black boy. Just, he had a normal childhood. Nothing, no red flags or anything like that. So on March 24th of 1994, George and his little sister Amay were outside playing. They were playing in their yard, you know, doing just normal things, normal kid things, playing around, when 2 young white girls were outside riding their bicycles in the black part of the town. So the 2 white girls, one was named Betty June Bennicker, and she was out with Mary Emma Thames. That was the second white girl. Like I mentioned, they were out riding their bikes on the black side of the town. It was reported that they were out looking for flowers when they spotted George and his sister outside playing, and they approached them and asked them if they knew where to find some flowers. They were looking for a specific type of flower called maypops, which is another name for passion flowers. So yeah, they asked George and his sister, hey, do you know where we can find some maypops? And George and his sister let them know, no, we don't know. And that was pretty much their only interaction, and the girls went off on their bicycles. So hours later, it was reported that the 2 little girls that were looking for flowers, they failed to appear home. And that's when a search party was launched to try and find them. George and his dad even participated in the search party to find them. As they were searching, George Jr. casually mentioned to a bystander that he had seen the 2 little girls earlier in the day. And that statement would ultimately lead to him being executed. So they were out searching for them, you know, all night, what have you. The morning after, the following morning, they ended up finding their 2 bodies in a ditch. It was reported by multiple sources that the girls had been beaten with a weapon, just based off of how badly their bodies were bruised. Some reports say that they were beat with like a metal pipe, and others said like it was a piece of like a railroad spike or something. But they were badly injured, badly bruised, and it just did not look good. Everyone suspected that foul play was involved, because of the conditions of their bodies when they found them. They both suffered blunt force trauma, and that resulted in penetration of both of the girls' skulls. And according to a report by a medical examiner, the wounds have been inflicted by a blunt instrument with a round head about the size of a hammer. But the medical examiner did report that there was no sign of like sexual assault to the younger girl, but the older girl, she did have a slight bruise on her genitalia area. So after everything was said and done, they found the girls and they did the exam on them, and you know, the medical examiner expressed their findings. The police listed George and his brother as a person of interest, so they both were arrested. Now George's brother, he was released by police. He was cleared of any wrongdoing, but George was held, and I believe it was because of that statement that he made to that bystander. Now, during the time of him being in police custody, he was not allowed to have any contact with his family or anyone. He was there all alone. Can you imagine being a 14-year-old in confinement, in police custody, accused of a crime you didn't even do, and you can't even contact your parents? Like, you're 14, you're literally a baby, and you can't contact your parents? I don't know what type of law that is, but it got to be against one. So yeah, he wasn't able to see any of his family or anybody like that until after his trial and his conviction was done. On March 24th of 1994, the sheriff in that town announced the arrest of George Stinney Jr. and he stated that George confessed to the murder and that he led the officers to find the iron pole that was used to harm the girls. There was also a handwritten statement. The handwritten statement was made by the arresting officer. His name was H.S. Newman, and this is what he stated, quote, "I arrested a boy by the name of George Stinney. He then made a confession and told me where to find a piece of iron, about 15 inches, where he said he put it in a ditch about 6 feet from the bicycle," end quote. Now, no one knows, I don't think to this day, if that statement was truly made by George. I tried to like read up on it and I couldn't really find any credible sources to say whether or not it was true, but I don't think that's a statement that George Stinney made. Following George's arrest, his father, George Stinney Sr., he was fired from his job at the sawmill, and his family had to immediately evacuate the company housing that they were living in. The family rightfully feared for their safety because back then there was a lot of lynching, and they feared that they would be lynched because their son is arrested for allegedly killing 2 white girls. And they were definitely right to be fearful of their safety, because on March 26th, a mob attempted to lynch George Jr., but he had already been moved to an out-of-town jail. Thank goodness. So again, his parents were not allowed to see him again before his trial or his conviction. He was in confinement for 81 days and he had no type of support. He was just there all alone. Poor thing. I can only imagine what he was thinking that whole time. He probably was scared, because I would have been. He was detained in a Columbia jail that was about 50 miles from where he's originally from. So he literally had nobody. He knew nobody in Columbia, but they moved him that far due to the risk of him being lynched. He was also questioned alone without his parents or even an attorney present, against the law. And at that time, the 6th Amendment, of course, was in place where you have the right to an attorney. He did not even have that. So I can see how they said that he made that statement. He probably was really scared and was just saying anything to like get them to stop questioning him. It's just terrible. But he definitely should have had a lawyer. If not his parents, definitely a lawyer. So fast forwarding to his trial took place on April 24th of 1944. Again, he was alone during his trial. They didn't even allow black people inside of the courthouse when he was up for trial. He did have an attorney during his trial. By the way, his attorney's name was Charles Plowden, but his attorney, he might as well not even had an attorney. His attorney didn't call any witnesses. He didn't take any statements or any questioning. He just was there, literally a body in a chair. I mean, he could have just represented it himself if that was the case. So basically his trial went like this. Plowden did not challenge the 3 police officers who testified that Stinney confessed to the 2 murders, nor did he try to defend Stinney. Like I mentioned, he just sat there. He also did not challenge the prosecution's presentation of two different versions of Stinney's verbal confession. In one version, George was attacked by the girls after he tried to help one girl who had fallen in the ditch, and he killed them in self-defense. In the other version, he had followed the girls, first attacking Mary Emma and then Betty June, but there is no written record of George's confession apart from Deputy Newman's statement. The prosecution presented the written statement that allegedly George confessed to murdering the girls, and that was pretty much the only evidence of guilt. Other than the testimonies of the 3 officers that were at the trial, prosecutors called 3 witnesses. Reverend Frances Batten, she was the one who discovered the bodies in the ditch, and the 2 doctors who performed the medical examination of the girls' bodies. The court did allow discussion of possible rape, even though the first medical examiner stated that there was no signs of rape besides a bruise that was on the older girl's vaginal area, and that's why it was allowed to be discussed, because of the bruise. But yeah, Stinney's attorney, he didn't call any witness, he didn't cross-examination, he didn't ask any question. He basically was just like, he did it, I'm just here because he needs representation due to the 6th Amendment. And yeah, that was pretty much it. Oh, did I mention he had an all-white jury? Not surprising. So they deliberated for about 10 minutes, and then they basically found him guilty of all charges. And the judge wasted no time with sentencing him to death. So he was tried, convicted, and sentenced all in one day. And it took 10 minutes to decide his fate. That's absolutely insane. Now, there was some appeals that were done by black advocacy groups, but the governor, Olin Johnson, he declined. So basically, he was just framed for the murders. So leading up to his execution, he was executed in June, on June 16th of 1944. So literally 2 days shy of 2 months of his conviction. He was executed on June 16th, 1944 at 7:30 a.m. Now, at the time of his death, he was 14 years old, stood about 5 feet 1 inch, and he weighed between 90 and 95 pounds. He was so small that to prepare for his execution, they used a Bible for him to sit on as a booster seat, because he was too small for the chair. He was restrained by his arms and his legs, and of course his body, to the chair. An officer did ask George if he had any final words to say before he was executed, but George, he just shook his head and said no, sir. He probably felt so defeated at that point. Like, he probably felt like nobody tried and nobody cared. It was just that, like, he accepted his fate at that point. The executor, he pulled a strap from the back of the chair, placed it over George's mouth, and it was reported that George did shed a tear. He pulled the strap from the back of the chair, placed it over his face, and he was executed. Now, also to mention, the mask didn't even fit his face. That's how little he was. He was then buried in an unmarked grave at the Calvary Baptist Church Cemetery in Lee County, South Carolina. So yeah, that is the story of George Stinney Jr. He still remains the youngest person to be executed in the 20th century. And it's just a sad case all around. I just felt like he was failed, and a lot more could have been done to prove his innocence. But of course, in that time, it was a white versus black, and it's just sad. It's just sad to hear. He was failed from the beginning, and he had no one there to protect him while he was going through his solitary confinement, his trial, everything. He was just by himself, and I can only imagine how he felt the whole time he was in confinement for those 81 days leading up to his conviction, his trial, everything. It's just a sad case all around, and I pray his soul rest in peace. It's still resting in peace, and it's just sad that the family never got any justice. And yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. Let me know what you think about this story, and I will be catching you guys in the next video. Ciao.